Hello, I'm Danielle Chauvet, your knitting coach. Welcome to Knitting Nicely. Today we're going to learn how to join two knitted squares together with a crochet hook. Here we go. Alright, so here we are at our workstation, and I've got a crochet hook and I've got my two pieces of knitted squares lined up together. I'm going to start out with just about 6 inches of yarn and then I'm going to hook at about 6 inches from the end of the yarn through the front of my right hand bottom corner, and then I'm going to take my right hand bottom corner and push the hook through from front to back and pull up a loop, and then pull it through the loop that's already on my hook. I'm going to give that end a little tug and move it to the back. We'll weave that part in later. So now this is just a really easy way to join two squares using a crochet hook. You just go back and forth, back and forth. So you pull up a loop on each side over and over again. So push it through the front to the back, pull up a loop, and pull it through the loop that's already on your hook. Then you go to the other side, push it down from front to back, pull up a loop, and slip it through the loop already on your hook. Down from front to back, then pull up a loop and slip it through the loop already on your hook. Over and over again, back and forth, back and forth. Now make sure that you are easing your work so that the stitches on the right side, which are ends of rows, are lining up straight across to the stitches on the left, which are cast on or bind off row end of your work. Because of the nature of knitting, the rows end up being a little bit wider than the cast on or bind off. So you'll need to sometimes work into the same stitch on the right side of the squares, and then go on to the next stitch of the top or bottom of your squares. All right. So as you can see, I'm going into the next V here, pulling up a loop, going into the next V on the bind off side, pulling up a loop and going through. Then I'm going to go through that same V that I went through last time on the right hand side, and the next V of the bind off side. You see that? So I'm easing it in. Every few stitches I go through the same stitch on a side of a square, but I never go through the same stitch on a bind off or cast on top or bottom of a square. That way they line up at the top when I get to the end. So just keep on pushing your hook through the front to the back, pulling up a loop, pulling it through the loop already on your hook. Go through the front to the back, pull up a loop, and through the loop on your hook. Front to back, pull up a loop, pull it through the hoop on your the loop on your hook. There, I did it again. I put it through the same stitch. It turns out for my gauge that I'm going every third V on the right hand side, I'm going through the same stitch. So I'll go through the next V, then the next V, then the next V, then the same V, every third stitch. Now as you can see, this bind off is pretty cute. It looks like rickrack because it's going back and forth in a zigzag fashion. And on the back side, same thing. It's like a little zigzag, but both sides are really nice and flat. There's no bulky seam to have to deal with. And it's also nice because you can see there that I've got my squares lined up and I'm making sure that they're staying lined up. Every once in a while you might want to drop your work and make sure that you're doing it correctly. So at the end, when you get to the top, you're just going to pull that loop and cut it, and then you'll weave your ends in using a tapestry needle. And whenever I weave my ends in, I like to go up and down on the purl bumps on the back side. So here I'll go down through a purl bump, down through that purl bump, catch it, there we go. and then up through the next purl bump, down, and then back up. Now I'm using a contrasting yarn, which I kind of like the look of this contrasting yarn with the gray, but if you choose to, you can use the same color of yarn as your squares if you don't want the seaming to be quite as prominent. So then I go around and I go up and down the same purl bumps to secure it, and then I cut the end of that yarn, and then I'll do the same thing on the top side, just weaving it in onto the back side of my work. Now the nice thing about this seam is that it's still stretchy, and it's stretchy back and forth, so it's not going to, you know, like tug on your blanket as you're moving your blanket around. I hope you enjoyed this lesson on joining squares with a crochet hook. See you next time. If you are enjoying Knitting Nicely's videos, you can hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you can catch all the great knitting tips.